The mother left her baby right after birth. But what happened will make you cry. We walk every single day among the formerly dead. Death is no longer simply the cessation of death or heartbeat or even brainstem activity. Doug and Melanie Pritchard were getting ready for their daughter to come into the world. Everything went well with Melanie's pregnancy until she went into labor. Suddenly, things started spiraling out of control, according to Little Things. While in labor, Melanie began having convulsions. Her body quickly shut down and monitors began to flash, and doctors called for emergency resuscitation, which appeared to fail. Doctors say Melanie died from an amniotic fluid embolism. When Melanie Pritchard went into labor, she had no idea that she'd wake up 3 days later in the ICU of another hospital with little memory of what had occurred while she was delivering her baby. At 39 weeks, she started feeling some lightheadedness and nausea. So she called over the nurse, who didn't detect anything striking about her vital signs. But moments later, Melanie had what seemed like a mild seizure. Her husband, Doug, watched, startled, as her heart rate and blood pressure dropped to zero. Her skin turned blue as her unborn child's heart rate dangerously plummeted. It felt like when I had died, I went to heaven. There was incredible peace I had felt. I knew I couldn't maintain it because it wasn't like anything I felt on Earth, she told Redbook. Doctors rushed her to the operating room while her husband, feeling utterly helpless, prayed, "Please allow me to hold my wife again." Shortly thereafter, the hospital social worker and a priest greeted Doug. I'm almost ashamed to say that my first thought was, I'm a widower. They'd come to tell me that my wife had died and that they did everything they could. But the only news they shared was that their baby was safely delivered by a C-section. When Doug went to visit his new daughter, not knowing whether or not his wife was still alive, he decided at that moment that he'd named their child Gabriella, the heroine of God. After an hour of trying to revitalize Melanie, who had been without a pulse for 10 minutes, the nurses were finally able to detect a faint heartbeat. The head of the ICU suspected that Melanie suffered from an amniotic fluid embolism, which is typically fatal. They encouraged her family to say their final goodbyes. My husband came to my bedside. He took hold of my hand and said, "I love you. I will always love you. If you have any fight left, then fight spite my hopes. Promise me that you'll follow your guardian angel wherever he leads you." After that, Melanie's condition became more dire. While performing the C-section, doctors had accidentally sliced an artery, so she had to undergo another emergency operation to stop the bleeding, as well as 2 blood transfusions. She managed to survive those procedures despite the fact that her abdomen was swelling with 5 liters of blood, which meant that as physicians feverishly tried to soak up the hemorrhage, she had to lie with an open abdomen for 12 hours. At this point, Melanie's lungs had failed, her heart had practically stopped pumping, and she was still unconscious. Doctors predicted that if she did survive the ordeal, she would have brain damage in her critical condition. She was transferred to a hospital an hour away that was equipped with an ECMO machine that could work her lungs and heart. As Doug entered the new hospital room, he said, "Hey, babe." Melanie's eyes began to swell with tears. At that moment, Doug knew his wife wasn't brain dead, but she also wasn't in the clear. I was elated, but I knew I wouldn't have much time as she would have to be sedated again for another surgery. She may not make it through. I simply told her that I loved her and that I was so proud of her, Doug recalls. Concerned that she wouldn't survive the operation, Doug showed her a picture of her daughter. I began to cry. Mama Bear must have come out because I began to twist and turn to get out of my bed. They sedated me once more and wheeled me off to surgery. For the first time, my family felt some optimism, even though the odds of my surviving the surgery were slim. She said the surgery was a success. When Doug saw his wife again, he recalls that she touched his face and said, "Hey, babe, how are you?" I laughed and kissed her hand and cried. Melanie's next words were profound, though she didn't know it. She'd seen another picture of Ella and told me, "It's okay, honey. You can take care of the kids by yourself." I knew she simply meant that she'd need time to recover and wouldn't be able to help as much as she would like. But my immediate response spoke to the severity of the situation she had just been through. I quickly responded, "I'm glad I don't have to." Within 24 hours, she was breathing on her own and had been weaned off all her medications except for the pain relievers. Melanie says, "I don't remember anything that happened in the hospital. This was tragic and traumatic for so many. So many other people were praying like crazy. I remember just weeping and crying and thinking, how could these people love me so much? Like a stranger? Even wow, this is so amazing. All I care about is having enough air in my lungs to tell my husband how much he means to me and just really being present to my friends and to my family." Her recovery is a miracle for survival was a miracle, says Doug. I think it's very clear that God answers prayers. Melanie was a prayer. Before any of this happened, I had always prayed that the Lord would protect me in pregnancy and childbirth because I thought with all the work that I do in the pro-life movement, if the evil one wanted to attack me, that would be the spot he would do it. I believed in the power of prayer, but now that I've lived through the power of prayer, I believe it 100 times more. A year later, when we spoke to the nurse who wheeled her into the OR, she was told, "I don't know if you're a woman of faith, but when I wheeled you in here, I felt like God was in there. It's amazing you were deader than dead." Today, Melanie is above all grateful to be alive and thankful for her doctors and nurses that fought to save her and Gabriella. Now that Gabriella is 4 and Melanie has had time to reflect on her experience, she says she has a renewed sense of strength and uses the experience as a reminder to value every moment since I came back to life. I've stripped away all that isn't important and focus on what actually is. My family and the life we lead together is heaven on earth. I focus on cherishing every moment with them and letting them know every minute how I feel about them. It's not taking anything for granted. Melanie, who is a motivational speaker, told us, "You spend your whole life building walls against the thing you don't want to feel." And I had many walls up. Seeing as I'm a speaker who counsels, I've had to harden my heart to counsel girls. And when I came back to life, the walls were gone and I began to experience authentic pain and joy that I never realized were possible. I was blocking out negative emotions, so I wasn't feeling full joy. You can't block out negativity and ever really feel happiness. It happens so many times. We'll feel the presence of some powerful force driving us in difficult times. Some call it God, some may give it another name. I believe truly in one God. I chant daily on that God's name. It has so happened now that whatever crisis I'm in or any worse situation, whenever I take that God name, I will come out of that problem or worse situation passes away soon. Miracles are nothing more than completely natural phenomena that can't be explained by the scientific knowledge of the time. This means that God is infinite power. The creation is just his imagination and is almost not true. The imagining person is said to truly exist. The world which is just his imagination and which is completely not nothing. The world is made of an iota of energy of God. God is like the infinite ocean of energy. Compared to God, the world is almost nothing. Thus, the entire creation is under the full control of God, just like the person doing. Some imagination creates an imaginary world in him. God created this imaginary world in him. The imaginary person can fully control the world. He can transform any item into any other item. He can raise a dead body in his imaginary world. All the miracles of human incarnations can be explained only by this concept. God, who is present in the human incarnation, does all these miracles only to establish this concept. If the world is equally true, then the world is equally powerful to God. In such case, God cannot do whatever he likes. Since the world is least powerful and God is most powerful, God controls the entire world like a very strong person controlling a very weak person. Thus, the word truth indicates the omnipotent nature of God. It's important for me to stay close to my source of life. Prayer helps me to do just that. If you love someone, you will try to speak to them often, even checking on them once or twice a day to see how it's going with them. My relationship with God is the same. Prayer does change things, all kinds of things. But the most important thing it changes is us as we engage in this communion with God more deeply and come to know the one with whom we're speaking more intimately. That growing knowledge of God reveals to us all the more brilliantly who we are and our need to change in conformity to him. Prayer changes us profoundly. Love and prayer save her life. Love is not an emotion, it's an ability. We strive to be better, more like God, more like angels, better than the average life forms. Yet bonding and maternal instincts seem to be the foundation of what human beings know as love. Love is the least understood, most sum about ability on the planet.